Welcome to everyone. My name is Crosby Garrison, and I serve as the Education Committee co-chair with Breezy. So on behalf of the DAPL, I would like to welcome you all to our second event of our Summer Landman series. And now I'd like to introduce our speaker for the author, management consultant, and speaker. Dick has been a trusted advisor to senior executives for more than 25 years in North and South America, Europe, and Asia. An expert in strategy implementation, organizational change, and leadership assessment and development, Dick works with leaders on sensitive issues related to team and organizational effectiveness. He has in-depth experience in oil and gas, pharmaceutical, and financial service industries. Dick has delivered educational and training programs throughout the world to more than 10,000 people. He holds an MBA in finance from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania and a Bachelor of Arts in political science from Yale.
Thank you, Crosby. Hello, I'm Dick Massimilian. Nice to meet you. Today is about you becoming a more effective leader. We will examine a particular aspect of your leadership style, how you prefer to interact with others. The intent here is to elevate your self-awareness, and that will enable you to be more effective, defined as able to get more done with people faster. So let's begin. Most of us leadership types today agree that the single most important attribute of a successful leader is self-awareness. Why? Because the more self-aware you are, the less automatic you are. You are better able to step back from situations, not be reactive, and actually design your responses. Now, there are many instruments that you can use to elevate an individual's self-awareness, lots of them. The tool we'll use today is the Myers-Briggs Type Inventory. In terms of your interpersonal style, we're going to look at 4 preferences you have for how you interact with others, and they are how you direct and receive your energy, how you take in information, how you use that information to make decisions, and generally, finally, how do you approach life? And the intended result, once you know your preferences, is that you interact with and lead people more effectively. What we're going to do is I'm going to give you a brief background about the MBTI so you understand a couple of things about it that you need to understand just so that it'll be useful to you. Then we're going to examine each one of the 4 preferences, and I will describe what the preference choices are. Then we're going to take a poll. I will talk a little bit about the practical applications of this instrument. In other words, once you know your preference, what does that mean? I'll also take questions via chat. Okay, the MBTI, the Myers-Briggs Type Inventory. What is this? The instrument is based on the work of a guy named Carl Jung. He came up with the idea of these preferences, and his work was picked up by an American woman named Catherine Briggs, and later she was joined by her daughter, Isabel Myers. There's a couple things that are important to understand about this instrument, only a couple. And the first has to do with, we're talking about preferences, not attributes or skills. So Jung said, well, you've got some innate preferences. Now, what does that mean? It doesn't mean you can't use your right hand and your left hand. It doesn't mean you can't sign with your right or your left. It does mean, though, that you have a preference, one or the other, and that's what we're going to talk about today, your preferences. Now, the other thing is this thing about bimodal distribution. What does that mean? Well, Jung said it's either or. It's this kind of distribution. Hump, hump. You're either heads or tails. It's not a continuum. The point here is there are preferences, and it's bimodal, it's one or the other. So those are the 2 things that are important to understand about the Myers-Briggs and what we're going to talk about. Okay, so what are these preferences we have here? So let's go to the next slide. Preference 1, how you direct and receive energy. How you direct and receive energy. Okay, option 1, extroverts. Extroverts direct their energy and attention outward. If you're an extrovert, you prefer to communicate by talking versus writing. Extroverts tend to be sociable, tend to be expressive, and have very, very, very broad interests. There's another option called introverts. Introverts direct their energy and attention inward and prefer to communicate in writing. Introverts work out ideas by reflecting on them. They like to think them through. They tend to be a little bit more private and contained, and introverts tend to focus in depth on a few interests. So you have outward versus inward. So which sounds more like you, extrovert or introvert? Okay, very good. All right, so we're about 60 to 62% introvert and 38 to 40% extrovert. So what does this mean? I mean, how do you actually make use of this? There's several things, and I'm gonna kind of invert this a little bit. I'm gonna start with the third one in a meeting. In a meeting, extroverts are gonna talk. An extrovert almost can't not tell you what he or she's thinking. Catherine Briggs said, if you don't know what an extrovert's thinking, you're not listening. If you don't know what an introvert's thinking, you have not asked. So in a meeting, when you open the floor, you're almost certainly going to hear from the extroverts first. If you move too quickly and you don't take time to actually ask the introverts in the room what they think, you're going to miss their views. You're going to miss their opinions. Secondly, you're an extrovert and you're managing a group of introverts. Probably you do something like tell people, hey, I have an open door policy. Come see me. Well, that's going to work fine for the extroverts that are working for you. They're going to come in and they're going to chat. The introverts, it's not going to occur to them to come in and chat. That's not how they're particularly wired. So if you're an extrovert, you need to get up, get out of your chair, reach out to them, because they are not going to generate that in and of themselves. With the introverts, if you're an introvert and you're managing a group of people, you will have extroverts working for you. Probably what will happen is the extrovert who likes to talk is going to come knock on your door and come in to chat. Probably your first thought will be some version of, okay, I'll talk to you. Let's get this over with so that I can go back to work. Don't do that. When you're talking to the extrovert, you are working. So introverts, you're just going to have to know when you're managing extroverts, you're going to have to just talk more than your inclination typically would be. And also, if you're an introvert, you're going to have to probably even calendar to get up out of your office to go check in with people. Okay, preference 2. How do you take in information? Option 1, sensing. If your preference is sensing, you are drawn to what is real and actual, what's right in front of you. The wheelhouse of a sensing preference is what's so. What have I got? Sensing folks build carefully and thoroughly towards conclusions. Carefully and thoroughly towards conclusions. Sensing preferences start with the specific and build out to the big picture. Intuitives are drawn to patterns and meaning. The wheelhouse of an intuitive person, the first question an intuitive is going to ask is, some version of why do I care about this? Why are we talking about this? Why is this important? Intuitives move very quickly to conclusions and they follow their hunches. The intuitive person starts with the big picture and focuses in. So the sensing preference. Question number one, what so? Question number two for the sensing person, so what? For the intuitive person, just the opposite. Question number one, so what? Question number two, what so? You're going to go to one of those first. So, which better, back to the polls, which better describes how you take in information, sensing, what so, or intuitive, so what? So, we have another 62-38, 60-40 split here. Those of you who are sensing folks, your Achilles heel is what I call analysis paralysis. The problem is you can stay in the details too long and you're prone to losing the big picture. So that's your Achilles heel. Be sure you're not in the details too long. The Achilles heel of the intuitive is this thing called cognitive bias. Intuitives jump to conclusions, and 80 to 85, maybe even 90% of the time, they're right. But oh boy, the 10 to 15% where they're wrong, it can get really, really messy. Take your boss. You're going in to see your boss. If your boss is an intuitive, start with a point, then tell the story. If your boss is a sensing preference, start with the facts, then go to the point. Preference 3, how you use information to make decisions. Thinking folks encounter a problem. Step back from the problem. Analyze and apply logic and look for an objective standard of truth, if you will, a rule that they can apply to that problem. In the world of the thinking preference, fair is defined as everyone is treated the same. The feeling preference. A feeling person, conversely, doesn't step back. The feeling person puts themselves right in the problem, jumps right in. Feeling preferences, folks, are guided by personal and social values. Feeling people define fair as everyone's treated as an individual, everyone's taken care of. So, voting time. Oh, okay. Thinking or feeling, time to vote. Okay. Well, we're close to our 60-40 again. 60% feeling, 59, and 41% thinking. Okay, practical applications here. First of all, good decisions require both perspectives because you have to be logical, but you also have to consider the impact of decisions on people. The thing here for you is if you are inclined one way, like the thinking way, train yourself to consider the relational aspect of whatever you're doing. If you're the other way, you're naturally wired that way, you train yourself to think through the logical rationale for why you want to do what you inherently and instinctively probably want to do. You need different language to influence each type preference. Don't try to convince a thinking preference using the logic of feeling. Similarly, if you are talking to a feeling person, never, ever, ever use the phrase "that makes no sense." They don't care. Let's see. Oh, all right. I'll go back. Laura, is one type better suited for management, thinking or feeling? One type is not better suited. It's all about your preference. It's really all about whichever your preference is, you have to make allowances for the other preference. All right, Preference number 4. How do you approach life? Number 1, judging. Judging folks like to have things decided. A deadline to a judging person occurs as uh-oh. The default of a judging person is how soon can we make this decision? But there's another option. It's called perceiving. Perceiving folks, not structured, their forte is flexible and spontaneous. A deadline actually mobilizes the best thinking of a perceiving person. Perceiving person operates from when is the last possible moment to decide. So these are the 2 options here. So I'm going to go back to my polling. Judging and perceiving, the poll is open. Okay, on this one, we're pretty evenly split, almost 50-50. In corporate America, the judging preference predominates except for 2 places, engineers, and the other place where perceiving predominates are designers, people that are the buyers and the designers for the limited and stuff like that in retail. It's very useful here to know your boss's preference and yours and adapt accordingly. If your boss has a judging preference and you have a judging preference, she or he is going to want it as soon as possible. You're going to want to deliver it as soon as possible, and that's all going to be fine. Where this gets interesting is if you've got a judging preference and your boss has a perceiving preference, and your boss likes to deliberate, likes to take his or her time, you're just probably going to have to learn patience. If you ask a perceiving person for something, and you can tell if somebody is, and you want it quickly, you've got to be very explicit about when you want it. If you're asking a judging person for something and you're a judging person, that's fine. You should still be clear about what you want it, but the judging person's going to want to get it to you quick. That's just how the 2 preferences work. We're going to take it for questions, and so I'm going to just summarize here. Jung and the Myers-Briggs postulates 4 preferences. How you direct and receive energy, outward, inward. How you take in information, details to the big picture to the details. How you use the information to make decisions. Step back, apply logic, come up with a rule to decide. Or jump in, deploy empathy, put yourself in the situation, come up with a solution for that situation at that time. And finally, how you approach life, structured, scheduled, avoiding deadlines, make the decision now, versus spontaneous, flexible, open, gather as much information for as long as possible, make the decision at the last possible moment. Now, when you use the Myers-Briggs tool, you put the 4 preferences together. That gives you something called a type. I'm happy to talk to you about what what your type would be. You can email me or whatever. It's on the bottom of the screen. And we can talk about that. With that, I'm now going to open the floor to questions. Carson, do you see these preferences change over time as we gather different experiences, or are they more ingrained in our biology? Well, Jung would tell you they're hardwired, you're born with them, they don't change. I tend to agree, but I think that we learn skills over time. And that does have some impact on our habits and our practices. So the bottom line, Carson, I would say is no. Just remember, we're talking about preferences. We're not talking about skills. Do we unfairly label perceiving preference people as procrastinators? Very often we do. It is the hardwired preference it somehow mobilizes the synapses in a particular way. All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the questions. I appreciate the opportunity to interact. Thank you to Crosby. Thank you to Breezy. Very much enjoyed it. And contact me if there's anything I can ever do for any of you. Take care and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
I wanted to say thank you to Dick for the very informative and helpful presentation. I know we will all put those tips to good use in the office. And with that, I hope everyone has a great week. Thank you so much.